Welcome, I am DesignerDave, and this is the Warcraft 3 Ask Me Anything that you never got. And that's primarily because Ask Me Anythings weren't really a thing back when Warcraft 3 released. In July of 2022, it'll have been 20 years since Warcraft 3 released. And I think that due to recent events, a lot of people are feeling betrayed, unhappy, disappointed with what's been going on with Warcraft 3, and especially Reforged. I can't do anything about any of that. So what I can do is sort of help you work through your nostalgia for the game and bring back those memories and maybe give you some resolution in anticipation of another game that might come out in the future that might be better. Consider it. In preparation for that, we took your questions, and I must say, it was a lot of freaking questions. I didn't expect this sort of output from you guys, but wow, thanks. I'm impressed with the sheer number of questions that we got. My goal, though, is that all of these questions will be answered in a satisfactory way and in a thorough way, such that no one's going to be like, well, you didn't really answer my question. I'm really going to answer all these questions as much as I can to the best of my ability. And I can't promise anything in particular, but I am looking at inviting some special guests to help me answer these questions so that it's not entirely upon me. Let's talk about me for a little bit. As you may or may not know, I was one of the campaign designers for Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, and The Frozen Throne. I did the Culling of Stratholme and several others, but people only really remember the Culling of Stratholme. And I was responsible for a large number of the in-game cinematics and for many of some of the most appreciated Easter eggs, which is something that I, in particular, am fond of, putting Easter eggs into games. But I was only one person of, I believe, a 9-person campaign design team. So I can't take credit for everything, and I can't answer every question because I don't know what other people necessarily were thinking, but I will try to the best of my ability, and in lieu of not being able to answer a question, I will try to turn it over to other individuals. We'll see what happens. But I think a large part of whether or not other people are going to be interested in participating in this AMA is the popularity of this one. So please like and subscribe, and please share this around with your friends, and maybe it will garner enough attention that the other people will be very easy to get involved. But we'll have to see. So, no better way than to start with question number 1. How much freedom did you have when designing campaign levels? Were you told how to set up the level, or did you just get some story outline and you could do whatever you wanted with it? Well, interestingly, we had quite a bit of freedom. When it came to the campaign levels, we were basically given a script written by Chris Metzen, and we would all sit around a round table, and read it together. And then when someone sort of felt like, oh, this is a level that speaks to me, they would grab it. That's what happened with me in the Culling of Stratholme. As soon as I saw Arthas was going to be slaughtering villagers, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so me. I'm taking this one. I believe I called dibs. And then once you are the campaign owner of that mission, you have free reign to do basically whatever you want. There are only a few things that have to be considered, which is that it has to follow the dialogue script. So those have to be in the mission somewhere, and it has to make sense, obviously. And what you're doing in general has to make sense. So when it came to the Culling of Stratholme, the script was like, yeah, Arthas is going to cull the city. Well, sure, that's exactly what I did. I made a map where you call the city against an opponent who was also turning them into zombies. And once that's decided, you opened up a new map. You picked the correct tile set and your base layer, whatever that might be. Some people like to work with grass initially. I usually work with grass initially. You picked your height and width. It was all up to you. Everything was completely under your control, and then you just started laying out your terrain and texturing and putting down paths and choosing your locations and then editing the triggers. It was entirely up to the level designer. It was a lot of fun. It was also a lot of hard work, so I don't want to gloss over that component of it. We had free reign to do pretty much as we pleased. Were there ever any plans for expansions post Frozen Throne? No. Once we do the expansion, that's basically it. I don't know if you've noticed this in Blizzard's history, but basically any second expansion was often done by another studio. I don't think that's a tradition that we carried on. And it's not because we couldn't do another expansion. It's just because people were so burned out at that point. Because you have to understand that Warcraft III Reign of Chaos basically went straight into the Frozen Throne. There was like a month off where people who were basically dead from over a year of crunch had lost their minds. And so he needed some time off to get over that. But then you just came back and you started working on the Frozen Throne. I'll say this for the expansion, though. Doing a game and then doing an expansion for it is always a good idea, because once you finish the game, you sort of have a complete set of tools and you have a good idea of how to use them, and everyone on the team is experienced with it. So the expansion, it moves so much faster, because almost all the decisions are kind of already made. And when it comes to the story and stuff, people are moving very quickly on it because they've already got an idea in their head of what else they wanted to do and all the missed opportunities from the previous ones. I wish more studios would go with that model of development, where they create the big game, the new release, and then they do an expansion for it, where they refine all the edges, and now that they know all the tools, they do like the really cool stuff that they wanted to do. It wasn't exactly like that for Warcraft 3 because there was time constraints and things like that, but that's pretty much how it went. Were there any plans or ideas for another Warcraft 3 campaign after Founding of Durotar? No. I'm just going to go with a simple no on that one. These two questions should have been complete. All right, that's fine. Do you prefer normal campaign style or the Founding of Durotar WoW version 0.5 campaign style playing and working on? Okay, I understand. So the Founding of Durotar has a unique backstory to it, which is that there was not going to be an orc campaign for the Frozen Throne. It was just going to be removed for time constraints, and so that we could have a relatively stable, easy, and breezy, campaign, an amount of time to get the game out. Now, that said, it was Tim Campbell's idea to do the Founding of Durotar in that Diablo style, and he pretty much did most of that himself in terms of it was his concept and he pushed for it and made it happen. I know he got help from a bunch of designers on that, including myself. But if it were not for Tim Campbell, that campaign would not exist. In terms of doing another version of it or expanding on it, no, that never came up because it was quite a chunk to chew for the development cycle of the Frozen Throne. So in terms of whether or not I prefer that campaign style, yeah, I do actually enjoy that sort of campaign style a little bit better because it gives you that sense of continuity, and it gives you a larger area within which to tell different stories and have a combined sort of story. So I do prefer them, but they are quite painful to create. What are some examples of story elements and missions that were scrapped entirely? So this one I already had notes for because I had to think about this one for a little bit. So a lot of people already sort of know about this, but Jaina was actually supposed to die in one of the early human missions as a motivation for Arthas. And that was obviously scrapped, both because you didn't really get to know Jaina well enough, and because it's sort of the fridge trope from comics. It was sort of a little bit tired. This is actually one of those things that's quite interesting from how Blizzard operated, at least back then, was that the campaign designers would read through the scripts and then they would give feedback, and our feedback was, this doesn't make a lot of sense because we just met her and now she's gone. So it doesn't work as a motivation for Arthas, and he's already got plenty of motivation. He's trying to save his kingdom from the undead. So it wasn't needed, and why kill a cool character and so on. And yeah, Jaina has gone on to be an important character in World of Warcraft as well. Another one is Illidan was initially a satyr. When we first read the script, he was a satyr, and he sort of spoke like a satyr from Shakespeare. He had that sort of kind of prose. If you're not familiar with Shakespeare, you'll get the idea. Not that it was completely like Shakespeare, but it was definitely prose. And we all were not feeling it, so he scrapped that, and Illidan became the demon hunter, and it worked a lot better, obviously. And Illidan, I think, is one of the most interesting characters from the series as well. And the final mission where you slow down Archimonde's ascent to the World Tree was the big one that got scrapped. So there was some people know about this, but there was another mission in Reign of Chaos at the end that would have been the precursor to the cinematic, where all the Night Elf sperm attacks him and gets into his pores or whatever they do. There was going to be a mission where he's actually slowly walking up this hill and you're like doing things to slow him down, but it just didn't work. It just wasn't fun, and it felt very anticlimactic after the huge battle in the previous mission. So it was scrapped pretty late in the game, pretty close to Gold Master. Was Jaina supposed to die in Call to the Dam? Yes, I just explained that. So I sort of answered two questions at once. I think that's why I paired them together like that. That's sort of how I picked these, is that the ones that were close enough I would put together. What was involved in the original final mission of defending the World Tree? So as I stated earlier, it was basically a giant Archimonde, like scaled up quite large, and moving up a hill towards the tree, and we had the branches of Yggdrasil kind of strewn throughout the mission. We had art for that, and you would build defenses, basically. So you'd build towers and things like that, and he would have to take time to destroy them. But really, there were too many ways to cheese it, and it just wasn't that interesting. Like, it was like a slow moving thing that you couldn't stop. You literally couldn't stop it, because the whole point is that he gets to the World Tree. So it was a mission you were going to lose, and then you're just sort of fighting a timer. And I've had a huge rant about timered missions like that, where there's a point of no return where you realize that you failed and there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how much time is left on the clock. But you have to keep going anyways, or you cancel and start over, and you're never really sure where that point is, and it's just frustrating. So it was super anticlimactic compared to the previous mission. If you were to make a new campaign today, what kind of stuff would you put in there? And would you make a new race with a new tech tree in it? Which race, if so? Yeah. If we were to make a new campaign today, I would do... split the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, and various other races. And I'd have like 10 different races and build entirely new tech trees and everything for them, and new units for them. I think the thing at the time, it's tough to balance an RTS. In when it comes to having 4 different races, it's very difficult to keep something like that balanced. And that was where the majority of time was spent, was balancing those units. And I don't think it ever actually... I don't even know if to this day it's balanced, or if it's just good enough that people accept it. So, with that in mind, the most fun is creating those units, coming up with the designs for what would the elves do if they were on their own, or what would the dwarves be like if they're on their own. So similar to how we did something with the Blood Elves, with like we had obvious limitations, but it would be fun to revisit that, and with art support and design support and code support, create entirely different tech trees and everything, and sort of delve into what would the dwarves be like, and so forth. In terms of a new campaign, I would like to do some sort of prequel Warcraft 3 story, because we saw how things were when a huge demonic threat was coming down, and that's sort of something you need to drive a story like that. But much like the Founding of Durotar campaign, I'd like to see a more sprawling, slower paced kind of story that delves into each of the races and sort of goes into their backstories and histories, and why they were warring and what brought them together. I mean, initially it was the orc threat, but I think that story hasn't been told for Warcraft in the right way, but maybe that's just me. Do you see any missed opportunities in Warcraft 3 or any of its missions? Yeah, I see nothing but missed opportunities. That's the problem when you're making these things, is after the fact you think of all the stuff that you would have put in when if you had had the time. Now, that being said, there's nothing in particular that I would change about Warcraft 3 now. It's more that there's like a degree of polish that I think we could have even gone a step further. That said, I wish that we had done more interesting side missions and more branching paths, because that was the thing that for me would have been the most interesting, is to have a branching storyline where you get multiple different types of endings depending on what choices you made. And I think choices in RTS games means I destroy this guy and I don't destroy that guy, and that has consequences down the road, and we never did anything with it because we were so afraid of the fallout of that, is that you now have all these missions with all these different things that you have to keep track of. But I think we should have just bit the bullet and did it. I mean, if Mass Effect can track your story choices, certainly we could too. Granted, it has different impacts in an RTS, and we have to be careful that some missions don't become unplayable, or it still has to follow the main storyline. But we could have done that, and I think we just got lazy or scared. So I wish we'd done a branching storyline, and then there would be the base canon, and then there would be the alternative endings, and I think that would have been really, really cool. Of course, it would have required more cinematics, but because of how long it takes to make the cinematics for Warcraft 3, that would not have been possible to have different cinematics for each one. But maybe we could have done animatics. Missed opportunities. What was the thinking behind the expansion human campaign being focused solely on the Blood Elves and their technology tree that is different from that of melee maps? And let's combine it with the next one, question 11. Why were there so many custom unit races in the Curse of the Blood Elves? It's because we wanted to have another race to show another tech tree, and so we sort of just took it upon ourselves to do that. I believe it's Tim who primarily wanted to do that. And a little bit of back lore, I guess. I wrote the lines of dialogue for the Elven Blood Elf engineer.
No, not like that. Let me do it. I'll have it up in no time. 2 + 3 times... What do you want?
So, one of the earliest bits of writing that actually resulted in voiced dialogue, so I was super excited about that. And the thinking was that players would be bored with the normal tech trees. So we just wanted to give them a new tech tree. Here's, try this out. Now, granted, it wasn't amazing, but it was different. And that was sort of the main thing that we wanted to focus on in the campaign missions. It's we're not teaching the game. This is we're doing this for story purposes, and so we can do whatever we want because it's cool. Hopefully people liked it, and Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne are all-time top games, I think. So characters like Uther, Kel'Thuzad in his necromancer form, and Tichondrius have voice lines but are never playable in the campaign. Were they intended to be playable? What other characters were taken out? It was intended that you could play with them if you wanted to. And the thing is, we knew we were releasing the map editor. So any units that we created specifically for the game, for the campaign, we made sure to have all the voice sounds that would be necessary if a player took them over or put them in a map and started to play with them. Otherwise, you would put Tichondrius in a map and you'd start clicking around and you wouldn't have anything to say. And you'd be like, oh, why is this character silent? It'd feel broken. So we did it for the players who wanted to play with it, that sort of stuff. What other characters were taken out? I think we used everything. I don't remember any characters being removed. Why does Tichondrius have a sheep on digging up the dead? Let's go look. Let's look at that. So I thought it would be fun to basically open up the map editor and see these things for ourselves. I don't remember everything I did. Let's be real. It's been a long time. It's been almost 20 years. Now, as I recall, where is his sheep, you say? You say he has a sheep, but I don't see it. Where is Tichondrius' sheep? Oh, you are correct. He doesn't drop anything. He's neutral. Okay. I know who did this. During development, the maps can pass through several campaign designers' hands. One of those campaign designers is David Hale. And I believe he's the one who put the sheep in here. I remember him mentioning something about, I gave him a sheep. And I didn't know what he meant. Now I do. So, Tichondrius has a sheep because Dave Hale thought it would be funny if Tichondrius had a sheep. He also named some of the characters. Let's see if we can find them. God, it's been so long. Is there one that brings up all the units? Aha. Here we go. Custom. So here you can see all the custom named units. Balcor, Dirk, Garak, Hebon, Joseph, Kenshin, and Liana. Kenshin's a reference to Rurouni Kenshin, and I was a big fan of that anime at the time, so I would slip in references to it periodically. It's also in my StarCraft Trigger Map of the Month program map, Deception, as one of the terminals you can find. Lots of doggos. This doggo has triggers. A unit enters near Kel'Thuzad. Entering unit equal to Arthas is false. Oh, it's when Arthas gets him near him. Why is there a dog in this one? Where's the dog? So all of this, like removing all the buffs and stuff, is just to not have those buffs in the cinematic. So you get near Kel'Thuzad. I'm not sure why the dog is referenced in here. That's quite strange. Oh, I know. Okay, so this is the Kel'Thuzad cinematic. So this is actually over here. There's a dog here. And I guess he has the dog howl or something. Maybe it's for sound. See, there's so many things that went into these maps. There's no way to know. There's no way to know. One thing that we don't have is a find option, which would have been great. Because if I could hit Control F right now and find the dog, that would be super beneficial. There it is. Lock Arthas' head to face dog. Oh my god, that's right! If you wanted Arthas to look at something, at that point in development, you would have to use a unit and face something. And so, I guess I used the dog. Oh, the memories. Because you have to remember that during Reign of Chaos, the map editor was in development at the same time. So sometimes we didn't have things like turning the head. And so I used a shortcut or a cheat. And I put this dog who's trapped here in this corner, and Arthas faces the dog during the cinematic to do for the purposes of the cinematic to make it more dramatic. That's a lot of work for just a head turn. But back then it was important to us, these sort of small details. So, it's funny what you can remember just looking at the map editor. The answer is because Dave Hale thought it was funny. But the sheep doesn't have any triggers or anything, so there's no real reason for it.